A question asked courageously, answered honestly, and lived authentically can change your whole life. For me, that question was, how can I use what I have, what I love, and what I know to bless the lives of others? The School for Good Living and this podcast are one answer to that question. Hi, I'm Brian Miller. I know that the world can work for everyone, but that it won't until it works for you. I've created this to help you make the difference you were born to make. It's a series of conversations with thought leaders who are moving humanity forward. And in each episode, I explore their lives and the work they do. I also ask them to break down how they've gotten their books written, published, and read. This podcast is all about exploring the magic and mystery, and sometimes the misery, of the creative process. So if you have a mission, a message, and the motivation to share it, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the School for Good Living. Welcome back to part 2 of my interview with Mark Nepo. Okay, Mark, well, with your permission, let's transition to the enlightening lightning round.
Okay,
how are you doing, by the way?
good.
Good.
Great.
Okay, good.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, this is a series of about 10 questions. They're relatively short. You're welcome to answer as long as you want. My aim is to ask the question, for the most part, to stand aside. Okay? All right.
Okay.
Question number 1. Please complete the following sentence with something other than a box of chocolates. Life is like a...
Oh, life is like the life cycle of water. We just imagine that, there's rain and snow, and it condenses and it falls to the earth, and then it collects, and then in the spring it melts, and it gathers and drifts down the side of a mountain, which was known as an acequia. An acequia in the Southwest, and in indigenous and in Native Americans and in Mexico, and also in the Middle East, actually thousands of years ago, villages would actually establish themselves around the bottom of an acequia, where natural water would flow, and then it would gather and give the source of water for people. And so life is like that, like water gathering, source dripping and dribbling into our lives so we get what we need. But the beautiful thing about the acequia is that once a year, villages have a ritual where they take 2 or 3 days, and every child, elder, mother, father, the whole village goes up the mountain and clears out the acequia, because naturally trees fall, beavers, snakes build nests, and they have to clear out the acequia, where water, the source, comes into their lives. And that's something that we need to do that we don't do, is how to clear out our personal acequia and our collective acequia.
Oh, I love that. And by the way, for anybody that hasn't already picked up this book, what you say about shedding in the book, I think, is just so beautiful.
Right. Oh, thank you.
Kind of along with this. Okay, question number 2. Borrowing this question from Peter Thiel, his famous question, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Probably how important the heart is. I think the heart is the strongest muscle we have. I think the heart is the inlet between inner and outer. It's the tuning fork of the sacred. And I think because of the life of feelings and the over-reliance on mind, there's a fear of trusting the heart, and a fear of discovering, that the heart is really our window to everything.
Well said. Okay, question number 3. I acknowledge this might be a stretch, but I invite you to just go with it. So, if you were required every day for the rest of your life to wear a t-shirt with a slogan on it, or a phrase, or a saying, or a quote, or a quip, what would the shirt say?
Well, there'd be many, but the one that comes to mind immediately is "Mind the Gap." So this comes from, I don't know if you ever, the first time I was in London, the Tube, their subway, there's the way it's built over there, there's actually quite a gap between the platform and when you step onto the train. Mm. And so, I don't know why, the way they built things, different than here in America. But so in the concrete, everywhere is actually built in is the phrase "mind the gap," and I actually have a T-shirt that I bought there last time I was in London for my dearest friend Robert and I, because we are always being asked to mind the gap between, not between true and false, between limited and whole, between partial and whole, WHOLE, and between what's covered and what's uncovered, between what teaches us and what muffles us. So I would say mind the gap.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, question number 4. And I believe you've now written 20 books. Does that sound right?
22, yeah.
22? And they've been published in more than 30 languages?
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome. So this one is asking you to set those aside for a moment and saying, what book, other than one of your own, have you gifted or recommended most often?
Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And that is, I don't know if have you had a chance to look at that book?
I have read that book. It's been many years, though.
That book, and I think, different books speak to us in different ways, but that book, the journey that is unfolded, which is everyone's journey, is a book that I've read probably every decade of my life, and it has spoken to me differently. And so I highly recommend it.
All right. Thank you. And just on the topic of books, what book or what's one of the books you're reading right now?
Well, actually, I'm reading a book that a dear friend of mine, also a writer, gave to me that's called In English, and it is a book about the art of translation, and it's phenomenal. It's from Grey Wolf Press. I can't remember the editor's name at the moment, but it is a book where the two editors who teach translation asked very gifted and established translators to choose one poem throughout history to offer, not their own, 3 translations of this poem or stanza or image, and different, and then to write a commentary about that.
Wow.
And it's phenomenal.
That's fun. Thank you. Okay, question number 5. So you travel a lot. What's one travel hack, meaning something you do or something you take with you when you travel to make your travel less painful or more enjoyable?
Well, I always, this is interesting. It's not something I do bring it with me because it's an app on my phone that my wife found. So, we're very attached. I'm very attached to my dog, my yellow lab, Zuzu, who was just here with me. So my wife, Susan, found this app, which is a camera app that called a Furbo. So I can actually, like I'm looking at you, like through Zoom, I can tune into her from literally anywhere in the world in our living room.
Wow.
And and she can hear me, and I can hit a button, it'll send a treat to her. So yeah, it's wild. So that really makes me, wherever I go, not seem so far away.
What's it called again? How's it spelled?
Furbo.
Furbo.
And it's a little camera that, and it has, audio. I can hear her, or she can hear me.
That is wonderful. That is really fun. Well, cool. Okay, thank you for that. Question number 6. What's one thing you've started or stopped doing in order to live or age well?
Oh, well, the one thing I stopped was letting fear run my life.
How did you manage that? I didn't see you levitate into the room.
Well, now let me be clear. It doesn't mean I don't experience fear.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
But I think, one of the deep things I've been working with recently, writing about, is this notion of that feelings are to be moved through and not always obeyed. So fear is something to be moved through but not obeyed. And so, when I have given fear the keys to the car, that's when it has ruled my life. That we're not going to get rid of fear. Fear is a natural part of life, and it has a legitimate, natural purpose. It's to alert us to danger. But then this is one of the liabilities of the mind. The mind makes a great echo chamber. And so now it makes an echo chamber out of fear, and it gives it great power. And then we wind up listening to fear. And, of course, if you ask fear, what should I do? It's going to say, be more afraid.
Yeah.
What else is it going to say? but I can't deny it because it will get bigger. But how do I, so this is the Buddhist notion of seeing things as they are is one of the most difficult, simplest and most difficult practices that I think is really important to us at every level. And this is one of those where, how do we right size our fear? So, it doesn't mean I'm not overcome with fear in a moment. I could fall down taking the garbage out after we're off this interview and have fear, but it's where does it land? Where does it come back? Does it return to right size, or do I let it? And I have dealt with fear my whole life, especially after being here, after my cancer journey. Of course, being afraid it'll come back, being afraid, of all kinds of things. So I think, Parker Palmer, do you know Parker Palmer's work?
Educator and activist.
Yeah, great, amazing educator, visionary. And Parker's a friend and a mentor, I consider. And Parker talks about how do we not drown in fear, but let the fear live in me. This is really with any kind of feeling, insecurity, any kind of feeling. How do we, and this is where the heart has to be opened up, because only when the heart is open, and we're open to that all things are true, and life is more than just what I'm going through, not to minimize what I'm going through, then we have a chance of allowing our very real feelings to take their proper place in the orchestra that is our soul. And not say, not have anyone feel and come up and demand to be the conductor. No, we're the conductor. And that's incredibly important. So so when I say that I stopped letting fear run my life, I stopped letting fear be the conductor. It didn't mean I vanquished fear or got rid of fear. It still has its part in the orchestra.
Yeah. What a beautiful description. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Okay, question number 7. What's one thing you wish every American knew?
Oh, that we are at heart the same. Thomas Merton, the great Thomas Merton, one of the things he said is if we truly beheld each other, we'd fall down and worship each other. And Longfellow said, if I really listened to my enemy's sufferings, they would no longer be my enemy. And I think it's the courage for us to realize that we are at heart the same, and so that we can love each other and care for each other. Another thing, so what would I want every American to do? Not, in order to know that, and that's listen. Listen with our heart and without conclusion and without presupposition. One of the most difficult things for human beings is to stay current. One of the gifts for us is that we don't, my dog redoes everything every day, which is their beauty, and they're so in the now. And because we do have this consciousness, I don't have to, if I trip in the hole in my driveway, well, the next day I know it's there. And at best I can avoid it. At worst I can fear I'll fall in it again. And so what happens is one of the detriments of having a mind is that what we learn solidifies into assumptions and conclusions. And that is kind of the way that plaque fills the arteries to the heart. That fills those hardened assumptions and conclusions form plaque in the mind. So when we listen, we have to find some practice to empty our assumptions and conclusions so we can stay current and fresh. And that's the place from which we listen. So let me share a quick story, which I love this story, two quantum physicists, because, it's discovered that a lot of the way that physicists see the world is very akin to how ancient Eastern sages saw the world. And so just a different language. So these two physicists want to go and speak to a Hindu sage in the mountains in the Himalayas, and he get permission to go visit him, and they want to discuss their thoughts and theories of physics in the world. And so they go all this way, and they fly, and they go by car, and then they go by Sherpa, and then they're hiking. And they finally get to this hut, and they go in the hut, and they're waiting, and there's a little wooden rickety table, and on it are 3 cups, and there's a pot of hot tea, and they're waiting and waiting. Finally, this old man shuffles in without saying a word, he picks up the pot of tea and he starts pouring in the first cup. And he's pouring, and now the cup is full and he's still pouring. And it's overflowing on the table, and the physicists are looking at each other like, we came all this way, the guy's lost it. Oh my God, what do we do? And he keeps pouring. And finally, one of the physicists says, Your Holiness, the cup is full. And still pouring without looking at them, the sage says, as are your minds, empty them and come back, and then we shall talk.
Wow. I love your description of one of our needs is to stay current. And when I hear that, I think of my own tendency to look online, either on, the mass media of what's going on in the world or in my social media feeds, trying to stay current. And as an alternative, what you're describing of, finding a way to clear those assumptions, some other practice beyond just filling the mind with more information or, arriving at more conclusions somehow.
Well, this is another kind of, because of technology, which is wonderful. Technology is inert. It's like a fancy screwdriver. It's a tool.
Yeah.
But what it opens up is it enhances this aberration. We live in a filler-up world. Fill everything up.
Yeah.
And all the traditions speak about in order to be here fully, and in order to make the most of life, in order to find each other and ourselves, we have to empty, not fill.
Yeah.
And it's not by accident that I want to say every instrument, and maybe there isn't one, but I'll say almost every musical instrument is hollow in order to make music. It's empty. There's no music if it's solid.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Yeah, and that reminds me, one of my previous podcast guests is a gentleman named Steve Zaffron, who's worked with Werner Erhard for nearly 40 years. And he talked about some of their early conversations on how do they affect transformation. And he said, as he was tasked with this early on in working with Werner, of designing some of these programs, and he said, we came to the realization that before one could experience transformation, they must pass through a space of nothingness or emptiness. And it's how do you create that in a workshop, But that was part of what they endeavored to do, and I think they've probably done a pretty good job. So, okay, fantastic question. Thank you for that. Number 8. So we're coming down the stretch. Any one of these could be their own seminar. And I actually, now that I'm here, I feel I want to set aside the last 2 questions. I know we're near the end of the time we'd agreed to as well. And they're only one's about love, one's about money. No big deal. But I definitely want.
Go ahead and ask them. That's fine.
Okay. And then, so if it's okay with you, I have, and then 3 more, and then we can wrap. Is that good with you?
Sure.
Okay. So the one about relationships is love. Is this? What's the most? And I know here's the American doing this superlative thing. What's the most? So if it's not the most, it's fine. If it's just something that's useful to you that you have learned about making relationships work, what is it?
Yeah, so I think this is very, very important, and I think I'm going to have to tell a little story about it to capture it. But it goes to the fact that learning and accepting that because of our limitations as human beings, we can't be all things to each other, and therefore I can commit that I will do everything I can to be there for you, knowing that I can't. So then that means what? That means I will be open to getting other tools and resources to fill in where I can't. So it's to recognize and accept our limitations so we can be even more present to each other. So the story is, this goes to, and I talk about this in the Book of Awakening, and it goes back to a poem by Yeats called The Mermaid. And I don't need to recite the whole poem, but the key thing is it's about a mermaid who falls in love with a boy, a lad. And of course, she lives in the water, he lives on the land. And she's so ecstatic that she finally has someone to share her depth with. And so she wants to show him where she lives. And the line is, so he takes a deep breath and she takes him down to show him. But en route, she's overcome with so much love. And the line is, she gives him this deep kiss, and in cruel happiness he drowned. And so it's not a happy poem, but what's revealed here is very important about love and relationships, whether it's significant others, family, friends, how we are there together. And that is where we can't be all things to each other. Paradoxically, every person has a depth like that mermaid that is life-giving for us. But if we force our loved one to go there, they could drown. So it's not only intoxicating, it's dangerous. So, the boy lives on land and he can visit the sea, but he can't live there. And she lives in the water. She can visit the land, but she can't. So where's the relationship? It's not in her secret place or his. It's on the shore. So that changes the commitment of love. It says, you can't come and live where I alone live. So what my responsibility is, the things that I want to share with you, I have to bring to the shore and not ask you to go where it might be dangerous for you. So this changes our romantic, I found you wonderful, you're all things there. Why can't you, so my wife's a potter and we've been together over 25 years, and somewhere, I don't know, year 9 or 10, and she's very wise, very earth grounded person. And I'm prolific and I share a lot with her. I have through the years. And I was excited to share something. And she looked at me, and I'll never forget, and she said, you know that I'm interested in your work, but you have to decide, do you want me to be your reader or your partner? Mm-hmm. And I didn't, no hesitation. I said, my partner. And in the years that have followed, I've come to see, as she has become so deeply in her craft and art, that world with clay and forms, and I can't go there, I'll drown, nor can she go where I go, and we have to bring to the shore. And it's like birds that fly out, but they come back to the same nest every day. And so we can't be all, another way that I understand this, I have a poem, I can't recite the poem, but the real lesson in the poem is, it's about promises. The heart promises everything, meaning well. And sometimes we break promises because we lie or we don't tell the truth. But often we don't keep promises because we promise more than we can deliver. Not because we're something wrong with us, but because then the image is, no matter how much a hawk opens its wings, it can't cover the entire sky. Mm. I promise the sky to you because I love you, but my wings can't cover the whole sky. My life can't cover the promises that my heart makes. I'll do my best, and that's different from lying or being hypocritical or promising one thing but not meaning it.
Yeah.
This is the difference. So that's the one thing about love that is, because paradoxically, when I accept that, I can give more.
Mm. Yeah, that's wise. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Final question here in the Enlightening Lightning Round, which is now about money, which is, what is something that you have learned about money that served you well? Or what's something you're always sure to do with it or never do with it?
Well, one thing is that informs all that is, after almost dying, it became very clear that relationship, time, and health are wealth, not money. And that informs, money is just another tool. It's just another tool. And it is to, again, to give wherever possible and not to hold on to it. Money won't protect you. It won't keep you from dying. It won't keep you from being lonely. So I think that, and this is one thing which is in the book, that I learned early on. Every human being has to both survive and thrive. Mm. And in our incarnation, we all get to go on that journey. And so we have to survive. There's no question about it. But if it's not to thrive, what's the point?
Yeah, and this is exactly Maslow's hierarchy, right? The survival needs at the bottom. and then moving
Well, yeah,
closer.
but I would add to Maslow's hierarchy that, there was a British developmental psychologist, Bowlby, who developed the theory of attachment, a good attachment, not that we need the bonds of relationship emotionally in order to so it kind of works with Maslow. I wouldn't even call Maslow a hierarchy. I would call it a constellation. And when we add Bowlby, it's like, yeah, we need that. And also, if we have those bonds, I can get through to the other.
Yeah.
So I think that, one of the things that, and again, this came to me unexpected, which these stories, share that when we can be authentic, whether great love and great suffering bring us to the edge of authenticity. And when we are there, we often discover what we didn't know we know. So like when I was in that hotel room where it came out of me to be broken, there's no reason to see all things as broken. I didn't know that I knew that. And when I was after I had that moment on the hill at Cortland, New York, and I went home with excitement to Long Island to tell my parents, who I was the first person in our family to go to college, and to tell my parents who had survived the Great Depression, first generation immigrants born in America. So to tell them with excitement that I discovered I was a poet and had this classic argument with my father, who was a master woodworker, how am I going to make a living? And I don't know where it came from in me. Again, I didn't know that I knew it. And I said, I'm going to live a making. And he was just, exasperated and furious. And
Did he think you were just being a smartass, or was
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Because sometimes I think kids say something like that, and we're just, well, it's profound, but other times it's like smart aleck.
Yeah, he was not impressed. And I had, like when I was in that hotel room later in my life, I had been brought to an expression of expressing something I didn't know I knew. And I spent many years trying to learn and understand what had just come out of me.
Yeah. Well, I love what one of the quotations that you use in the book of C.S. Lewis about something to the effect of, many times in our lives when the most important things are happening, we have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. The kind of thing. And similarly, I mean, your approach of writing, of saying that I don't write about what I know. That's not why I'm prolific, not because I write about what I know. I write about what I need to know. And then the books are the trail of the inquiry.
Absolutely.
I'd never ever heard that before, but I thought that was so fantastic. And even then, the way you were saying, in that way, every book becomes your teacher, or like the boat or the vessel that then carries you forward in your journey.
Absolutely. And so when I write, poems, because it all goes, as atoms are the building blocks of life, poetry, that quality of authentic perception are the building blocks of all my work. And I discover poems and they lead me, that they become my teachers. So if I'm honest enough and true enough in whatever it is that I'm trying to express or work with, I'm often given an insight or an image, just like I mentioned earlier about the promises and the hawk and the wings in the sky. So I was troubled by this disparity between wanting to promise so much and being able to deliver so little. And as I started to explore that in a poem, the reward at the end of that honest expression was this image appeared. It's like a hawk spreading its wings. It can't cover the whole sky. And then I said, I didn't know that and say, well, wouldn't it be neat to end the poem there? I'm not that smart. But I discovered it because I was led to it.
Yeah. And then you were open.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, congratulations on surviving the enlightening lightning round.
Yeah.
You've done admirably. The final question in it technically is this, which is, if people want to learn more from you or they want to connect with you, what would you have them do?
Oh, well, clearly, I have two websites, marknepo.com and Three Intentions, all spelled out one word.com. And it's a sister site. And you can find there where I travel a lot and teach a lot and offer retreats and workshops and then speak at conferences and things. But I also, in addition, where I live in Michigan, I offer a year-long journey, and as well as a 6-day deep dive for a small group, no more than 30 people. And if you go to my website, there's a little video and there's a link where it has all the details how you can register for that. And those are intimate journeys that so that I can, because I like to be able to do that in addition to all the travel.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And we'll definitely put that in the show notes as well. And people who haven't already subscribed to your newsletter that I believe you also call Three Intentions.
Yes.
Which I don't know if it's weekly or bi-weekly, but
it's weekly. It's weekly.
And I've enjoyed those.
Oh, thank you.
I don't think I see them every week, but I'll check my settings. At any rate, yeah, and that thing that you're saying about the workshops and the teaching, what a gift. I don't remember where I read it in your writing, but something about that it was almost an unconscious that you created that space for yourself as a way to stay in relationship with what is sacred.
Yeah. Well, I think that, given that I grew up like a lot of people with a kind of a dysfunctional family, and so I didn't have really intimate friends until I got to college. And I think that unconsciously I made I made that heart space in the classroom so that I could jump in and be a part of it too.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so and I'll say this here to make sure I don't forget, but one of the things that I have done is an expression of gratitude to you, Mark, for making the time and sharing of your wisdom with me and everyone listening is I have gone on to kiva.org, the microlending site, and I have made a $100 microloan to a woman entrepreneur in India who's named Sunita Ben, and she will use this money to purchase a cow for expanding the animal husbandry business she has with her family, where she sells milk and butter and cheese. So in some small way, this is benefit.
Well, thank you. That's very touching. Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, for the final thing here, Mark, if you're okay with it, I'd just like to ask you two final questions, and I don't think they'll spawn a long thing. I don't think. The first one is, you mentioned that in dreams, Tufu, I don't know if he's ancient, but the Chinese poet Tufu,
yes,
has been a guide for you.
Yeah.
Are you speaking literally?
I'm speaking literally, not obviously, he lived in the 700s, so physically he wasn't a guide for me, but he has appeared through dreams as a guide for me, yes. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, it sounds like more than once. And
well, twice, really notably. And, not much else beyond that, but they were very profound times. And so I remember Tufu, who's one of the great poets of the Tang Dynasty in the 700s in China. And it's often said that Nepo and Tufu are together they are China's Shakespeare. And Nepo was very outward, famous, almost like Emerson and Thoreau. He was like famous from the time he burped, and Tufu was very much like Thoreau, very grounded, very unknown, but just an amazing voice. And I remember when I was in college reading Tufu for the first time, and it was one of the first times I felt like, God, I felt like I discovered a friend through the ages. He was so real, so human. I wished I could talk to him, So one of the two times that he really notably appeared to me was once during that time when I was in college in a dream. And I was very, just full of wanting to nobly dedicate myself to a life of poetry, and what does that mean to be an artist, and how do I do this, and about fame and creating things that are meaningful, all of that. And so in the dream, I wanted to ask him about all this, and somebody said, "Oh, he's up that mountain. Go, you'll find him. He's up there. He might be on his way back down." And so I met him halfway up, and he was in a hurry to get back down the mountain to his family. And then I was very intimidated in the dream, and so I stumbled, and I wasn't asked, I wasn't saying anything, Mr. Tufu, and he didn't have time for it. He put his hand on my shoulder, and he read my mind, all the questions I had. And he simply looked at me, and he said, "If you can't see what you're looking for, see what's there. It's enough." And then he went off down the mountain back into the world to find his family. And then I woke up, and that changed everything for me, because then I stopped trying to climb and get to the top of the mountain. And I realized the whole purpose of poetry was to be in the world. And I realized that, yeah, if you can't see what you're looking for, see what's there. This is years before my cancer journey, years before I discovered the lens of the ordinary was the miraculous. If you can't see what you're looking for, see what's there. It's all right there. It's all right there. And the second time Toufu came to me was very pointed during my cancer journey when I was terrified of everything, and I'd never been really ill or had anything life-threatening, and it was running my life. I was just exhausted with fear. And I remember having this dream where I was looking to ask him about it. And it was on a shore, and he was sitting squat-legged, cross-legged in the sand with a stick in the sand. And I came up to him very agitated and said, "How do I block the fear?" And he wouldn't even look at me. He's just drawing in the sand. And I was angry. I said, "How do I block the fear?" And without looking at me, he lifted the stick and he said, "How does a tree block the wind?" And with that, he disappeared. Wow. And I woke up. And obviously a tree doesn't block the wind, it lets it through. And that was the gift, the secret to how to stop having fear run my life was to let the fear through, not to hold on to it.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, the last question that I have for you is just one is a topic I'm very interested in. I was an Asian studies major. And I've only recently, in the last few years, made the journeys to India and Nepal and Tibet. And I'm learning more firsthand, from visiting the countries where a lot of this teaching that I've learned has originated. But one thing I'm so fascinated to learn more about, which is maybe kind of a paradox, is this principle of non-doing, Wu Way, effortless, spontaneous right action, this kind of thing. And I'm wondering, again, any answer is wonderful, but if you were to direct me in deepening my understanding, and I know life is the ultimate teacher, but are there any resources, books, teachers, anything that you might point me to that's going to help me, even if only conceptually, understand this principle of effortless action more fully?
Yeah. Well, let me speak to that, not answer it, with a story and also sharing my own, what's become my practice. And that is, we understand this in the Western world. In sports they talk about it as being in the flow, and or in jazz, it's when the music descends and and then all of a sudden the hands take off and it's a riff, And so this is where I believe in the interface between effort and grace. So I believe in effort because I don't know when grace will show up. And I also believe that often effort is grace in slow motion. And so I think the key is to drop all intent, is to burn intent as kindling to the fire of non-doing. That is, I give my all, and I may start out because I have an idea for a book, but then let go of it. That's only to light. That's the match that lights the fire. And then to allow myself to be the flame by by holding nothing back and giving my effort and letting the effort unite me with grace and to see where it takes me. So that's been my greatest teacher, to burn all intent. Not to not have intent, because often we need intent to start us toward what we can't imagine. So it's not like, okay, there's no intent, so I'll just sit here in this room and meditate. No,
right.
No, I need intent, and then don't deify it. Burn it in the fire of aliveness, and see where we go. So the story is one of a sage who sends his student to sit by a river and meditate until he's learned all the river has to teach. And he's a very serious student. So he has his cushion, he has his pillow, he has everything, and he goes to the river, and he spends the whole first day figuring out where to sit, And he finally sits midway under a willow tree, and he goes into serious meditation for 3 days. after which the only thing he has is a terrific headache. And just as he's, feeling exasperated and he opens his eyes, and a monkey out of nowhere jumps in the river, splashing and yapping, and it cracks him. He starts to weep. And so he gathers his things, he goes back to his teacher, and he tells him what happened. And his master puts his hand around him and he says, the monkey heard, you just listened. And so, I read everything, and I've always been a deep believer and love reading. But the goal is to get wet. The goal is to get wet.
Okay. Thank you. No, and that it maybe is too what you say about be the poem.
Yeah.
Before you wanted to write great poems, and now you want to be the poem. That's beautiful. Okay. Well, Mark, you have been so generous, and I realize as someone who's been doing this for decades, this is not a new experience for you where people feel they know you very intimately from how much you've shared. And I, in some way, feel that way. Like I've known you a long time, and I'm grateful for your work, even though your book has sat on my shelf for many years before it arrived in my awareness. And I'm really, really grateful. And for what it's worth, I am very grateful for the work you're doing and the time you spent with me today, especially. It's been a privilege.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your good work. And I feel like I've gotten to know you somewhat in this time, too. So, thank you, and grateful for the work you're doing. And likewise. Who knows, maybe we'll meet somewhere along the way.
Yeah, perhaps. Okay, well, I'll talk to you later. Take care. Despite living in an age where we have more comforts and conveniences than ever before, life isn't working for many people. Whether it's in the developed world, where we're dealing with depression, anxiety, addiction, divorce, jobs we hate, relationships that don't work, or people in the developing world who don't have access to clean water or sanitation or healthcare or education, or who live in conflict zones, there's a lot of people on the planet that life isn't working very well for. If you're one of those people, I invite you to connect with me at goodliving.com. I've created Life's Best Practices Breakthrough Coaching to help you navigate the transitions that we all go through. Whether you've just graduated school, you're going through a divorce, you just got married, you're headed into retirement, you're starting a business, you just lost your job, whatever it is you're facing, I've developed a 36-week course that you go through with me and a community of achievers and seekers who are committed to improving their own lives and the lives of others. So through this online program, you will have the opportunity to go deep into every area of your life, explore life's big questions, create answers for yourself in community, get clarity and accountability. If that's something you're interested to learn about, I invite you to contact me directly at brian@brianmiller.com or by visiting goodliving.com.